Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. If there's anything designed better to destroy an entire industry, it is that curious admixture of ignorance and arrogance as shown by SNP ministers. This time it's Neil Gray. He is refusing to bend the knee, refusing to back down, refusing to change the rules on short-term lets. For some reason, he has a bee in his wee Scotch bonnet, and it is going to destroy this industry. It is going to damage tourism just at a time when Scotland is desperate for money coming from that very sector. We're talking about short-term lets, we're talking about the registration and licensing of these, and we're talking about the fact that between 60 and 80% of people who indulge in short-term lets are thinking of quitting because of this licensing scheme. How on earth is that going to help the likes of Edinburgh when it comes to providing accommodation for visitors to the city? Well, it's obviously not. So there we go. Another SNP policy that cannot be changed because of ideological dogma, and it's about to absolutely rack and ruin the Scottish tourist industry. These people are dangerous, and it is just another example of how a moron with power can destroy everything he sees. Let's have a look at this article, see what's going on, and see why Neil Gray really is the ultimate SNP moron. Here goes. Right, so we've got this headline, but we are going to go into the story. But it is just an example of how someone really doesn't understand the consequences of policy. And they're going on, for some reason they have this bee in their bonnet because they think, oh, short-term lets, and they go, Airbnb. But short-term lets are more than Airbnb. We're talking people who have for years run small, sort of sideline businesses operating a room here or a small flat there that provide accommodation through particularly tourist times in places where they need the income and the dollars coming in. And so far so good until now, because of the bureaucracy and the paper filling and all the licensing requirements just to let out these rooms, because Scotland has a housing crisis, and these people seem to think that if you end short-term lets you'll cure the housing crisis. You won't, of course, because a lot of these short-term lets are totally unsuitable as permanent housing. But idiots in government. Anyway, Neil Gray's stubborn refusal to delay short-term let licensing is typical of the SNP. Any hope of a delay to short-term let licences to save the shutdown of the majority of businesses have been crushed by this SNP economy minister, a man who does not understand his brief, a man who does not understand basic economics. The SNP has confirmed that there are no plans in place to extend the looming deadline for short-term licences, lending them accusations of a stubborn refusal. It's arrogance. It's the arrogance that they think that they know better, coupled with the ignorance that they quite plainly don't. Neil Gray, the Economy Secretary, told the Scotsman that there were no plans for the October the 1st deadline to be extended, despite increased frustration and fear from the sector. The sector are saying, all the Scottish Tories are saying, it is typical of this SNP Green government, who cite that 60% of B&Bs and short-term lets are preparing to shut their doors. Over half the industry about to close its doors over this issue. Where do they think the tourists are going to be staying? When tourists are told that there is quite literally no room at the inn because the inn has gone, they're just going to go find somewhere else to go, and with it goes their money. Edinburgh, that figure could rise to 80%. Edinburgh, major tourist area for Scotland, 80% of short-term lets could go. That is astonishingly high, isn't it? The Scottish Government's stance has been compared with their DRS failure, and indeed the failure of everything else, that led to widespread industry backlash. The deadline for application has already been extended by 6 months. However, this time there is no delay into impending rules that will make it a criminal offence for many to rent rooms or properties. If you own a property, it's your property, and you have a room, This is your property. You should be entitled in law to do what you want with your property. And indeed, the Human Rights Act does talk about the freedom of property and the freedom to indulge and enjoy your property. And if by enjoy you mean renting it out to people on a short-term basis to help pay bills, then that has got to be fine. That's got to be within the rules. But Scotland said, no, you're not allowed to rent these rooms out for short-term stays because they don't want you making money, because that makes you happy, I think. I don't know. I don't know the reasoning behind it. Meanwhile, all these rooms have gone, all these little flatlets have gone, all this short-term leasing has gone. And what are you left with? A city devoid of short-term lets, devoid of accommodation. And when the tourist season starts up next year, you're going to have to look at all these tourist places that rely, the places that rely on tourist money, crashing and burning because there quite simply isn't that demand anymore because the tourists haven't come. A survey of 1,200 business owners by the Association of Scottish Self-Caterers found 61% of bed and breakfast and small holiday let businesses were preparing to shut their doors at the end of September. Data available on Inside Airbnb, which scrapes figures otherwise unavailable to the public, suggests Edinburgh has around 7,700 listings, of which 6,000 have seen at least one night of occupancy in the last year. It is feared that with fewer options, the cost of accommodation will rise for tourists in an already expensive city. It will. It's the laws of supply and demand. When the supply is high, the demand is low, and therefore the prices are low. But when the supply falls, demand increases massively, and with it, prices. This will price an awful lot of people out. Those that do go will have less money to spend in the city because they're paid more for the rental. It's going to just be a general lower level. You're making the cake smaller because there's fewer places to actually be. So you're actually bringing in fewer tourists because there's nowhere else for them to go. And the whole of the tourist economy in Edinburgh particularly, but Scotland generally, but Edinburgh particularly, will crash and burn because of one policy. One policy. That's it. Shadow Cabinet for Secretary for Business, Economic Growth and Tourism, Murdo Fraser, said Neil Gray's stubborn refusal to consider a further delay in implementing these new licensing rules for short-term lets is typical of this SNP Green government. Ministers like the Economy Secretary continue to ignore the huge concerns from those who will bear the brunt of their badly devised policies. The self-catering industry have highlighted that over 60% of B&Bs and short-term lets are preparing to shut their doors at the end of next month, while in Edinburgh that figure could rise to 80%. They will have a huge and devastating effect on Scottish firms, particularly the tourism industry, and make a mockery of Humza Yousaf's plans to reset his party's relationship with business. Now we're going to have a look at that separately in another video later today, hopefully. Just like their insistence on pushing ahead with their shambolic deposit return scheme, he said, long after it was clear it was falling apart, this will create massive disruption and inflict unnecessary costs and damage. For once, the SNP Green government must actually listen to the warnings of those affected, urgently pause these plans and make the revisions needed to make them workable. I'm going to go more. Abandon them. There is no reason for licensing. Why do you need licensing? It's so that the SNP can get in and inveigle itself and push itself into every single aspect of every single business on every single sector of the Scottish economy. It's like that Soviet thing where every business has a political officer embedded deep in the factory or deep in the farm or deep within the military. They've got to have the SNP's political officer there, and no commercial decision can be made that the political officer doesn't help. Someone at the door. Right, sorry about that tiny gap in the middle there. Nothing I could do when people come to your door. Oh, never mind. Where were we? Now, yes, political officers in there. Yeah, we were saying there. So the SNP need to inveigle themselves, as I say, in every aspect. And that's all this is. Because these businesses have run themselves for, 50, 60 years, some of them, without licensing and just getting on with it. Providing a good service at a reasonable cost in a healthy market. And that market, of course, is being disrupted by the SNP, who think they're doing something good, but in actual fact are once again destroying an entire industry because of dogma. And it's absolutely, typical of this party. And it is arrogance. It's complete arrogance. Mr. Gray, in his latest interview on the issue, said, "We have been engaging very closely. I have personally, with the Scottish Tourism Alliance. By engaging, you mean dictating, because you certainly haven't been listening." And he said, "And try to make sure that we're encouraging people to be applying for their licence." Well, why do they need the licence? You give a reason for the licence, because previously it's not been needed and it's worked very well. All of a sudden you say, "Oh no, we need to have a licence." But why? There is no reason. No reason at all, except for political expediency and except for putting the SNP into people's private lives continually at every level. And it is Big Brother. This is a totalitarian state, and people are blindly walking into it, blindly saying, okay, basically have every aspect of everything I do under your political microscope. So that if there's something I do that you don't like, I am okay to be punished. That's what they're saying. They're basically saying, by voting SNP, that they're happy to be inspected in every aspect of their life and found wanting by a bunch of people who, yesterday we showed, were encouraging the mass grooming of children. Don't let the SNP in. Tell them, reject. Every aspect they do, reject it. And as for the ULEZ areas in London that are now being basically destroyed, Khan is now effectively given up on it. Day one yesterday, in one part of London, 90% of cameras weren't working. Nobody is doing anything. People are rejecting it. You've got the local councils refusing to even put the signs up. And without the signs, Khan cannot then enforce any fines, because there was nothing to sign. There was no signage saying that we're entering it. This is the rejection of a bad policy, and it needs to happen all the time. And not just this policy needs to be rejected, but the ULEZ in Glasgow, Edinburgh, in Aberdeen. They all need to be rejected. When they do something that the people don't like, we need to take an example of the French model. Take to the streets and reject it. And when they put cameras up, we take cameras down. And when they start licensing, something and trying to inveigle themselves into your private life, no, reject, and vote them out. And say why you're voting them out. Because you don't want your life coming under their microscope when they are themselves so appallingly awful. Anyway, Neil Gray, the idiot, continued. We're looking to provide as much information as possible so that trade organisations and representative organisations can encourage their members to comply with the legislation that's been in place for a number of years. No, it's not purely my area of responsibility. This is obviously across different government departments. But there are no plans to see an extension when there's already been a 6-month extension of the licensing deadline to allow businesses to comply with it. Do not comply. Refuse to comply. Think of, the Gadsden flag? And the old rattlesnake. Do not tread on me. The rattle is the warning. And you're telling them, don't tread on me. Well, we need to start flying that Gadsden flag. Start saying, do not tread on me. We're giving you the warning, do not tread on me. Because we will bite back. And we can. Because we are many, they are few. And that's the one thing that politicians are absolutely terrified of. Because they know the basic truth. We are many, they are few, and when it comes to it, we will win because we have the numbers. We have the right. We will win. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to come up. As I ended that section, I said, we have the numbers, we have the right. And it suddenly went into my head. I knew I'd heard that before. And yeah, it's Wake Up the Sleeping Giant by Twisted Sister, which is an excellent song, by the way. And one that should really be the national anthem of the people of Great Britain. Not just the Scots, not just the English, not the Irish, but the people, the plods, us, the serfs. That should be our national anthem. Because it is. We are the sleeping giant. We're the ones that if we woke up, we could change the world. Unfortunately, too many of our fellow countrymen are still blindly following like ignorant sheep. They're not aware of what's going on. And that is why I always ask that you share these videos that you like the videos so they go out, and that you please subscribe to them, because we need to make people aware of what's going on at all times. And this rule, this law they've brought in is another example. It's another way of removing previously held rights and freedoms, smothered, taken away from us, and we have to pay a license to a council to do what we previously did for nothing. And in return, we get nothing. We get nothing. They just net our money because they're so desperate for our money, because they've screwed up everything that they've done. So yes, please do hit the subscribe button, do hit the like button, and do share the video. And until next time, I thank you for watching this one. It's really good. I enjoyed doing this one, even with the little gap in the middle. So thank you very much. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, and remember, we are many, they are few. Goodbye.